Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2011. It's 6:30 p.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast Mayor and City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Here.
Councilmember DeStefano? Here. Councilmember Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember Mormon?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is the approval of the April 19th council meeting and the April 26th council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the minutes be approved.
I'll second.
Moved and second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, proclamation recognizing Hospital Week. Mr. Mormon.
Mr. Mayor, it gives me great honor to present this proclamation to the Florida Hospital Flagler. Two of the members standing next to me are part of the Hospital Foundation Board, and they serve with distinction and run the operation. I'm just a member. I sit there and take notes. These guys do all the work. But the proclamation reads, whereas a hospital is more than a place where people go to heal, it is part of the community that fosters health and represents hope. And whereas the dedicated healthcare professionals and support staff who work in our local hospital deserve appreciation for helping to improve residents' health. And whereas Palm Coast is privileged to have Florida Hospital Flagler within our community, a superior health care facility that is committed to providing high-quality, compassionate care for a team of expert physicians and specialists. And whereas the city is proud to recognize and celebrate health, hope, and healing with not only Florida Hospital Flagler, but all hospitals in the state during the National Hospital Week. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Palm Coast Mayor and City Council proclaim May 8th through May 14th, 2011 as Hospital Week in the city of Palm Coast, and urge all residents to express their appreciation for the people, facility, and technologies that make trustworthy and reliable health care possible in our community. Adopted this 3rd day of May 2011, the city of Palm Coast, Florida, John Netz, Mayor. Tony, my pleasure.
My pleasure.
John?
Thank you, Jose. I'd like to have a word.
I've made a mistake.
I know what that mistake is.
Never give.
Yes. He asked me if I would like to have a word. And we hope we never see any of you down at the hospital. But if you have occasion to come down, you need to know what a quality place we have. We have a fully operational cath lab now that you can have a heart episode and get fixed right there on the spot. We've got a PET CT scan, the first in Northeast Florida. No other hospital has one. And we have the Da Vinci robotic system that we have just put in within the last 3 months. Those are major developments in the healthcare for our community. And that's just the start. I mean, I can stand up here and I can talk 5, 10, well, you know how I am. But we appreciate you giving us this recognition for this week, and I will leave you with saying, get to know us before you need us.
Agenda item number 3 is a proclamation recognizing Arbor Day, and I think I'll do this one. Carol? Bill, anybody? Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now celebrated throughout our nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Palm Coast does hereby proclaim Saturday, May 7th, 2011 as Arbor Day. And be it further proclaimed that the City Council urges all of its residents to support the efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to plant trees, which will promote the well-being of this and future generations. Dating this 3rd day of May, 2011, my pleasure to sign it, John Metz.
Thank you so much.
I bet you want to say a few words.
Of course I do. You know me. So Arbor Day, it's coming fast, and we're very excited about it. And I wanted to talk to you about what's new for 2011. And first off, thank you, Mayor and City Council. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Carol Bennett. I'm the Urban Forester for the City of Palm Coast. So what have we been up to? We started in 2005 with 4 vendors and 100 tree seedlings and about 40 attendants. And out of the 40, probably between 25 and 30 were city employees. So I'm happy to say in 2010, we had 45 vendors and we gave away 600 3-gallon trees, and we had just a little over 3,000 attendees. So we really have come a long way in a short period of time. And so let's talk about what we're doing for 2011. We have enhanced our website, and it's a fantastic experience, a lot of wonderful photos from Arbor Days past. And new for this year, we have a 5K route run and walk. So I don't want to scare people who say, oh, I'm not a runner. It doesn't matter. You can walk, you can jog, you can walk and jog at the same time, or in between. So it doesn't matter. Or if you are a runner and you love to run and you can do a 5K, which is a 3.1 mile run, pretty quick, then you'll love running. Also, to add to that, we decided to do a 1-mile Flutter Fun Run, so try to say that 3 times fast. But that's geared towards families, parents with strollers, and also they can bring their dogs and do the 1-mile fun run. So we're very excited about that. Currently, we have 142 participants that are signed up, and we still have a few more days to go, and we're hoping to have a little over 200 total participants, so we're very excited about that. So also, what we decided to do this year would be a little bit different than in years past, is we wanted to feed a mouth, get a tree, and grow a community. And what that means is that we have partnered with the Grace Community Food Bank, and we have also the Flagler Youth Center, who will be selling food, canned goods on site for people to come purchase a canned good, receive a ticket. They will take their ticket to the tree tent and turn it in and get a tree. The canned goods will be donated to the food bank. And Pastor Solano wanted me to express his thanks for all that we're doing in our partnership, and wanted me to tell you that last week they served over 400 families, about 1,760 meals. So he is thrilled to have the partnership, and they are in desperate need for the food. So we're very excited to see how this works out. I've been getting email from residents who have their canned goods by the door. They're waiting for Saturday to come and bring them in. So you can bring your own canned good if you choose, but if you choose not to, we are providing them on site for you. Also, we have an enhanced kid zone. We're going to be doing a tropical water slide. So you adults, you can participate if you would like to. Also, our community partners, I've already mentioned a couple. One would be the Grace Community Food Bank. The other is the Flagler County, the Youth Center. Also, a lot of the schools groups are participating this year. Indian Trails Middle School, their students are coming out. They're going to be helping with the race. They're going to be handing racers water. They're going to be handing T-shirts and bags. And they're also going to be setting up their own educational booths, letting the residents know what they've been up to in the way of community service. So we have a lot of community partners this year. Also, our hours have changed because we have the race up first. We're starting the race at 8 o'clock. Well, let me back up the registration. No, you're fine. Thank you. At 7 a.m., the registration starts. And then the race will kick off at 8 o'clock. The 1 mile Flutter Fun Run starts at 8:45. And then we hand out our awards at 9. And then the donations, that means we can start taking your donations and giving you a ticket at 10 a.m. And we will start the tree giveaway at 11. This year we'll be giving away 1,000 trees. So we bumped it up because last year the trees went pretty quick, and we wanted to kind of have more trees to extend throughout the afternoon. We backed by popular demand, the butterfly release, and we're switching it up this year. We're going to open with the butterfly release. So hopefully the butterflies will hang out during the hours that we're there, and the kids and participants will get to see some butterflies flying around. And where would we be without our dunk tank? And I have to say, I am so thrilled that Mayor Netz is going to participate in our dunk tank. And I'm wanting to see if he can beat Barbara Grossman, because she, a couple years running, has been the big money winner. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to beat her out, Mayor Netz.
I want a discount on balls to throw at Frank.
I'll tell you what, as opposed to charging less, I'll let you stand closer.
Well, we always have a hard time keeping Mr. Meeker out of the dunk tank, so it'll be fun to see.
I'd rather do the tropical slide.
Water
thing.
slide.
Well, you could start with that, and then you can make your way over to the dunk tank. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for doing that. Also, our Chief Beadle, where are you? So he's up too, so don't forget about him. And also Trevor Tucker is going to participate. We also have some dancers. They came last year. They were so popular, I asked them to come back. That's 3 in Motion. And then our festivities will close at 4, and all day we'll be having live entertainment. We're going to open with a Spanish guitar and flamingo dancer. And then we're going to have an acoustic rock band. Actually, it's just 2 guys. But anyway, then we're going to have a DJ.
It's a band.
And then another band which has 4 guys. But they're all very good, and I think you'll be very pleased. So this is where we are right now, and we hope that these new items are received very well, and that we can continue the tradition of doing the Get a Tree, what am I saying? Oh, Feed a Mouth and Get a Tree and grow a community. So thank you so much for all your support that you do with Arbor Day, and I look forward to seeing you out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Agenda item number 4, an ordinance relating to transportation system impact fees. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending Chapter 29, Article 2, Sections 2931 through 2938, relating to transportation impact fees, accepting the transportation impact fees consolidation report, amending definitions, applicability, amending the amounts and the procedures for the imposition, calculation, collection, expenditure, reimbursement, and credit of transportation impact fees to provide for early payment incentive, amending the annual adjustments and updates of transportation impact fees, amending Table 3-1 to reclassify uses into groups, and to provide for an average fee, providing for applicability of ordinances for codification, conflict, severability, and for an effective date.
Thank you very much. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is another one of our tasks that we have in our economic development strategic plan called Prosperity 2021, and that is to take a look at impact fees to make them more fair, simpler, reduce conflicts with local businesses, and address some of the concerns that we've heard throughout the last couple of years. So Nestor is going to give you the full rundown on this. It's an item that City Council has seen twice at a workshop. You've asked for some changes. We've incorporated that, and now Nestor will present it to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Landon. Mayor and Council, impact fee and specifically the impact fee fairness is an issue that's been identified by Council in its 2010 goals and objectives, where specifically you set out that we should provide economic development and an incentive policy. Part of what we're proposing gets to the incentive policy. Also, it was identified that the building permitting, that whole process, should be simplified and streamlined, and our proposal goes also a long way towards simplifying the process. Also, in the Prosperity 2021, our blueprint for growing the local community development, economic growth, flexibility of impact fee payment, deferment, also again simplifying the process for permitting, deferring fees, trying to get at a methodology for assessing fees that makes a lot more sense, it's a lot more reasonable than what we have currently. Also in that Prosperity 2021, we talk about certain aging commercial areas. We'll get into some of those areas and how this proposal gets at trying to provide the relief that these areas could use. More for the benefit of the public, but before we get into specifics, the purpose of impact fees, why we collect impact fees. And I should say that in this case, we're talking about impact fees that are collected, assessed at permitting for new construction, new projects, new development, for transportation impact, parks impact, and fire impact. One of the reasons we do so is capital improvement and infrastructure. That's how we get to fund construction projects for fire stations, for parks, for roads, without putting the burden on taxpayers. It's how we sustain development. Said otherwise is how we manage our growth. It's part of our comprehensive plan calls for this impact fee, and it's also something that's very much supported through the Florida statutes, the concept of assessing impact fee to cover for new development. This proposal gets at three major components. The first component is for existing businesses, and this is and it's best done through examples. Some of these existing and aging commercial areas that we've identified, whether it's Palm Harbor, St. Joe's area, the Hargrove Grove, these industrial and commercial areas that are looking to revitalize, are looking potentially to change use, land use, to include more intense use, and this proposal we'll get to shortly tries to help with this issue. The second component is simplifying the fee structure, with the main goal to be that developers, the owner, initially when a building is constructed, that fee is paid once and only once. Really trying hard to avoid having tenants, future tenants, business owners come back and have the burden of the impact fee. We will talk about how we combine and average these fees, basically how we consolidate land use classifications. I'll point out that at this time that some communities, there's communities out there that do their impact fee, and they basically have two classifications, a residential classification and a commercial classification. We have 67 classifications for transportation impact fee. And what we're going to propose, it's somewhere between two classifications might not be enough, but 67 is way, way too many for us to manage and for the applicants to try to make sense of. The third component that we'll be talking about is trying to get at how do we provide an incentive. In our proposal, we put out two types of incentive. One would be a deferral of payment, deferring when the payment is due, and or additional or otherwise a waivement, a reduction of the payment, the fee amount. Okay, the first component, the existing established businesses. I mentioned that typically we're talking about Palm Harbor, we're talking about Hargrove Grade, St. Joe's. What we're proposing in ordinance is to waive for those existing buildings, structures that were permitted prior to incorporation, that when they come in and they're proposing to change the land use to go to potentially a more intense use that would currently require them to pay an additional amount, we're proposing to waive that for buildings completed prior to the city incorporation in '99. Now, in our technical report, we get at some of the reasons, and we discussed this in our workshop. Big part of it is available records. And I've seen staff, and I've assisted staff in trying to determine when a particular building that might have been constructed in the 1980s, how much they paid, what they paid subsequently when they had change in uses, and it becomes unmanageable for us to get access to those records, to check the validity of the records, and it also puts an undue burden on this applicant that's now trying to prove a point, but the records aren't available to help make that point. We also, in justification, we also recognize that these buildings and structures that have been around for a time, they may have gone through many different changes in use and many business reincarnations, that for some time they've been paying, if not impact fee, but they've been paying into city and county taxes. I guess what I would say with this one is, when it comes to our quest to simplify and streamline the process, boy, there's nothing simple and streamlined about trying to assess a building for which you can't find adequate records of previous payment and previous users. This second component is the simplifying the fee structure. And I mentioned that last time we met, that the Tyndale Oliver report from 2004 is very technically sound. It's very robust in its information. It's very consistent with ITE, the transportation manual, but they provide us with too many land use classifications, 67. We're looking to consolidate and reduce the numbers. The main objective is to have development pay, developers, initial owners pay the impact fee, to avoid having to have the tenant, the businesses have to pay an additional fee. Some of the examples that we've dealt with when businesses changes from office to medical office, restaurants, retail to restaurant, warehouses to auto repair. These are all real-life examples that have come our way recently, and it's difficult to have to go back and get an additional fee. The third component is what we call the fee deferral and early payment incentives. What we're currently, I should point out that our ordinance says that fees are due at permitting. Before you get your permit, you must pay all your fees. What we're proposing is that we defer that collection of the fees till prior to certificate of occupancy, and that's for all applicants. And not just for all applicants, but all the three impact fees, the parks, the fire, and transportation. Or otherwise, we're proposing a 3% early payment incentive, basically pay at permitting rather than at completion, and we would propose to waive the 3% administrative fee that's part of this ordinance. I want to show you 5 of the major groups that we did most of our consolidation with. The first one that pops up is the residential classification. We end up with three compatible use residential classifications. What we do is we consolidate, come up with one group fee, and propose that that would be the fee for all residential classifications that are listed on this table. Where a fee is lowered by this consolidation, that new fee would go into effect if this ordinance is approved immediately. Where an increase in fee is a result of the consolidation, what we're proposing in ordinance is a 5-year phase-in period, allowing that fee to catch up over the next 5 years, spread it out over 5 years. I need to, at this point out that Mr. Britt brought to our attention this afternoon that if council approves this item, that before we come back a second time, there'll be language to reflect that the indexing that really has nothing to do with this presentation, but the annual indexing that's done to the impact fee, the transportation impact fee, is an index that comes from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. They've decided to discontinue the indexing service. So, and he tells me that there's another agency that's providing the index, and if you approve this, for your next reading, you'll see that will be changed in the ordinance. This is an area, the general office and retail is an area that we did most of our consolidation with. This, the technical, for all of these, the technical justification is wherever we find compatibility in land uses, wherever we find that the trip generation is very similar, marginal difference between the uses, those are good candidates for this consolidation. So we take all the items under here, consolidate into one fee. That would be the fee for this general office and retail land use grouping. We do that with the standalone. These are buildings that are not part of another group. Convenience stores, bank and savings, and restaurants. In this category, we took 2 different types of convenience stores, 2 different types of banks, 2 types of restaurants that had minimal difference between each, and combine it into one category, combine and then further consolidate that. And we end up with one fee for this whole group. We do the same thing with large box. Again, we look for compatibility of land use. We look for similar trip generators and are able to consolidate into one fee, everything contained within this category, this grouping. Industrial and automotive, we find a lot of compatibility with these 2 groups. Some things we took out from the previous presentation. We took out auto sales, new and used. They're out of this group, not very compatible. We found a place by itself. Same thing for general heavy industrial. For the opposite reason, one is more intense. The general industrial is considerably less intense. Good candidates to stand out by themselves. And we combine 3 types of warehouses with minimal difference between the types. And we come up with one group fee. Kind of in summary, with the transportation fee ordinance, 3 major components. The first being the pre-incorporation the waiving of fee for any additional new permits for an increase in intensity of use. Second component to the fee deferral, deferring payment due till completion rather than permitting, and providing for an early payment incentive of 3% for those wishing to pay at permitting prior to the CO. We have the consolidation, the classifications, and the proposed new fee schedule. And along with this package is the component, the 5-year phase-in, and also part of this package is the technical justification. Now, also for consideration this evening is 2 other ordinances, the Parks and Rec and Parks fee ordinance and the fire impact fee ordinance. With both of those, you're looking at the same thing. We're adding the fee deferral, deferring till completion, certificate of occupancy or prior to completion, and or otherwise the option to pay early, pay at permitting, and receive the 3% discount.
Council questions? Mr. Lewis.
Just one. Nestor, in terms of the revenue lost, what is the impact on that, if any? On the impact fee, we're consolidating. That's what I'm looking at. We're consolidating it, and we're making groups. Hard to say.
You're basically finding uses that are compatible. You're averaging, so an average means that where you may lose $1 here, you make it up there. It should be marginal. It should be minimal one way or another. It shouldn't be made much of an impact at all. And we didn't set out with this. We didn't set out to make winners or losers or increase or decrease. We basically set out to make the process better, more streamlined, take some of the guesswork and the heavy calculations out of this. But the financial impact should be minimal.
Minimal.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Other council questions? Seeing none, let's open the meeting from the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 4? Please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Good evening, City Council. Jason DiLorenzo, Flagler Home Builders Association. I don't know, the groups changed, but on the original, when the original groupings were, and I think only 2 or 3 were pulled out of that original grouping, 26 of the impact fees were actually going up and 19 were going down. So it should be pretty marginal if there's any difference. I just wanted to touch on a few things. I first had a question that I'll ask an answer for. There was some discussion about retirement home. It's category 251, and there didn't seem to be a clear definition given at the last workshop. There was talk of if that's a deed restricted or age restricted home. So if someone could clarify that, that would be appreciated. This helps streamline the impact fee system, as Nestor said. It makes it easier for staff to communicate with the landowners and give them an accurate assessment of what their impact fee will be for their new construction. I think it improves opportunities for businesses to expand as the changes in intensity, if they're within the same groups, there won't be an increased fee, so they'll be able to expand without having that big hit from an impact fee. It also, I think, promotes infill of older buildings, which I think is important in our community, that the pre-incorporation buildings will have no change in fee, so if you change intensity, so that will help promote filling in those older buildings, something very important. I think it provides economic development for medical, which is a state and local targeted industry, so that's also very strong. And also, I knew there was one more. Oh, yes. Currently, if you change intensity, if you increase intensity, you pay a fee. But if you decrease intensity, there's no, the current ordinance doesn't give an opportunity for a credit. So that solves that inequitable part of the current ordinance. Thank you very much. I hope you support this.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, I'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, retirement homes.
Good. One of the benefits is that we get to tweak and update some of the classifications. This is one of them. This retirement home is an obsolete use, an obsolete term, and it gives us an opportunity to put in what is really the current term and the current use is a senior adult housing, and that's.
Reading into Jason's question, though, senior adult housing, in order to qualify for that, would it have to be deed restricted or age restricted? What defines a senior?
I may not have the answer, but I can tell you that it's in the manual, and the manual gives us real good guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. Back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion? Mrs. DeStefano.
Back to seniors. I believe there's 3 areas of living for the seniors. One is a nursing home, which are all single or 2-party rooms. The second one is assisted living, which are almost always independent, either a room or an apartment. And the third is independent living, which are apartments. So those are the terminology that we currently have in Flagler County and I think in medical. So my question would be under institutional category, are you talking about congregate care facility? Where would I go if I was independent living? These are all apartments like Las Palmas. But if you go across to the other one that's in that category, they're all rooms.
Okay. Bob Boggs, he's the keeper of the manual, the transportation
Good. Okay.
manual.
Thank you.
Manetz, member of the council. Council.
Right into the microphone, if you would, sir.
Am I on?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
I'll try to speak louder. How's
That's
that?
better.
Okay, good. We're using the ITE definitions, and independent living isn't in that group. There's assisted living, congregate care facility, and continuing care retirement community. And they all deal with different levels of medical care and, assistance from staff. Senior adult is essentially you or I, and we're living in a home, we may, in our own home, we may be retired or we may not be. And most of these senior adult communities, there is a mixture in there. But the assisted living is the easiest category. You may need some help with meals or with medication. Congregate care, there's a little more medical need. And then the continuing care retirement community starts, you move in, and as you go through the aging process, the amount of medical care you get increases. Does that help any?
No.
No.
Doesn't help.
I'm sorry.
Let me.
Independent care is I give up
Isn't
my...
that a contradiction in terms independent living?
Independent
If you're
living.
getting care,
Thank you.
you're not independent.
Okay, I stand corrected. Independent living is I give up my home and I move into a facility where I have an apartment.
Right.
And then I have common, in a common area, we have entertainment, you have your food, or you can eat in your own apartment. Mm-hmm. That's independent living. And that's what I was just trying to figure out, where that would fit in. They don't provide health care, they don't provide nursing, they don't help with medicines. It's just you've transferred from your home to an apartment that's a regular apartment is really what it is, an apartment building.
It would essentially be treated as an apartment, I believe. Probably we would call it senior adult housing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me clarify, if I may. There are 2 other categories here that we haven't focused on that might be helpful. Under institutional, there is nursing home and there's aggregate care facilities. Mm-hmm. So it does distinguish when you actually have that higher level of care. The senior adult housing, if that's our latest terminology, is the apartment that's age restricted and is defined as such in the manual. Am I correct, Bob?
Yes.
I don't
Okay.
see it in our list, though.
It's the new definition of
We added that because that is what the magical transportation guru book calls it, and therefore the ordinance being consistent with the book you go to get the definitions. And that's what we're trying to do.
All right.
I think it's table 3.1, and it's under residential other.
Okay,
Second
got it.
page.
Thank you.
Mr. Mormon? Okay, you're going to offer that clarification?
Okay.
Suggestion.
Additional council questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve ordinance 2000X relating to transportation system impact fee.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker,
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano,
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis,
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon,
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5, an ordinance relating to park system impact fees. Mr. Reichman.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, relating to amending Chapter 29 Impact Fees, Article 3, Park System Impact Fees, amending Sections 2980 and Section 2981 to make a correction and to provide for a payment incentive, early payment incentive, providing for applicability, severability, codification, conflicts, and for an effective date.
It's hard to read that when you got underlined
We got a lot of
strike-throughs,
changes
isn't
in
it?
there.
Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is, there's no additional presentation. The presentation before covered both of them. This particular ordinance just addresses the park fees, and therefore the early payment incentive is what we're really trying to address here. And I actually, in listening to the conversation, Nestor, I don't do this very often, but I've got a question for you. The consolidation in the housing units, is that all, because commercial does not pay park impact fees. The consolidation of the housing units we just talked about, does that apply to this ordinance also or not?
It does not.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just transportation.
Exclusively.
And this is a certain fee per unit. It doesn't matter whether it's apartment or single family?
That's correct. Yes, residential, and yes, for both park and fire.
Right. So this, the key to that, City Council, what we're saying is that all these other classifications are strictly for your, that we just talked about is for the transportation impact. Here it's a set fee based on number of units. And the only thing we're really doing here is giving them the incentive to pay up front or get a discount if they pay early, you might say.
Council questions? No. Seeing none, we'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 5?
Good evening, Jason DiLorenzo, Flagler Home Builder Association. I asked for your support on this one as well. It's an incentive to pay early, and also gives you a payment option for a little bit more flexibility. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting. Go back to council. Additional questions, comments, or motion?
Motion to approve the agenda item.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker,
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano,
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis,
Yes.
Councilmember Mormon,
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, ordinance relating to fire and rescue system impact fees. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, relating to amending Chapter 29 Impact Fees, Article 4, Fire and Rescue System Impact Fees of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Palm Coast. This is amending Section 29108 Payment to provide for an early payment incentive, providing for applicability, codification, conflict, severability, and for an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Mayor,
Same comments as the previous one.
Same comments. It just provides that early payment incentive.
Council questions on this one?
Ditto.
Seeing none, we'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Come on, Jay. Oh, okay.
Charlie Erickson, Palm Coast. Could I just ask, I thought I read it said 3% of the administrative fee. I understand that not to be 3% of the impact fee. Just help me understand that portion.
We'll get you an answer to that one.
Jason DiLorenzo, waving support.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting, go back to council. But first, clarification. It's not 3% of the administrative fee. It's an administrative fee of 3% that is waived.
It's the latter, yes. There's a
And it's 3% of
built-in total fee.
Of the total fee.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 3% of the administrative fee would be nickels and dimes. Would not be of any incentive. Okay.
Sounds pretty, though.
City Council, additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Motion to approve?
I second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Meeker?
Yes.
Councilmember DeStefano?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Here, yes.
Councilmember Mormon?
Yes.
Mayor Netz?
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 7, a resolution approving the 2011 Transportation Impact Fee Consolidation Study. Mr. Landon.
This is the actual study that is a technical report that you have to adopt in order to adopt the ordinance. This only takes one reading, so if you adopt this, that gives you the ability to actually approve and do final adoption of the ordinance at your next meeting.
Council questions? Seeing none, open the meeting to the public. Anyone in the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 7? Seeing no one. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting, go back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
I move adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
By saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 8, resolution authorizing release of letters of interest for the Business Park Partnership Program. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is another item, task on our Prosperity 2021 Economic Development Plan. You know, when we have prospects coming to town, it is always interesting to show them around different possible locations to locate a new business and hear the comments they make. You know, recently I heard, "You mean we got to cut down the trees?" Those kind of comments tell me that, we probably have competition out there that's going to win this proposal when we don't have sites ready to go that they can put their feet on and take a look at. We do have some of those sites in town, and we have a number of sites in a variety of stages for development. So what's the best way to attract those new businesses, particularly industrial? My opinion, I think what City Council has also stated is not for government to go out and try to create the jobs, but try to create an environment for the private sector to create the jobs. And that's exactly what this proposal is to work with the private sector to see if we can't market the assets that we have better with them and work together to make sure they're as ready as possible. The concept behind this is still an unknown, totally, or I should say is not totally known, because what we're really doing is saying, okay, private business park owners, we would like to establish a conversation to see how we can work together. We are not proposing tonight actually what that agreement would be or what that partnership would be, but we're really just trying to get that process started. If it's too costly, if we don't have any interest, then we won't go any further. I think that is a key. What we're trying to do is say, what is the interest? Let's see if we can't take those steps to gain a competitive advantage and move forward with it. And so with that, Bo is going to talk about the concept as to how can we get a competitive advantage over our competition for these businesses by working with the private sector.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bo Falgu, Senior Economic Development Planner. As Mr. Landon stated, we have seen with the rise in number of prospects visiting our community, we do have some sites available, and there's some sites in all different stages, but time and time again, we hear from the prospects that they want to be up and running within a year. And there's some challenges here in our community. And also, the competition here is fierce. It's not only fierce in the private sector, it's fierce in the public sector for these prospects. So tonight, I'll try to give you a little bit of background and talk about the concept of the program. Once again, it's still a concept because we do need some additional information before we bring back a formal proposal to you. Again, this is part of Prosperity 2021. It's part of that strategy to encourage job creation and create that climate. It's also encouraged development of the business districts we have in the city or soon to be within the city, the airport area, the Hargrove, Pine Lakes, and Roberts Road. Per your direction, we've been getting to work on Prosperity 2021. We started with the low-hanging fruit, such as our marketing efforts, the trail maps, the Business Assistance Center that's coming online. Tonight you heard about impact fees. Now we're starting to move up the tree. The low-hanging fruit we've pretty much tackled, and we're starting to get a little bit more up the tree, and that's why we're talking to you this evening. Before we begin, when the economic development team was looking into this subject and talking to property owners and economic development professionals, we've learned there's lots of definitions about pad ready and shovel ready, and so we thought we'd start off tonight's presentation with just a few definitions and what it means to prospects. Raw land, of course, it's the least desirable situation with the highest level of risk for a prospect. And meeting that startup schedule where they're going to outlay capital to start a business. The land may or may not have the proper land use or zoning and could take 1 to 2 years before even the construction of the building could take place. I will say in Palm Coast and Flagler County, we do have adequate land in industrial categories and commercial, but we do have a lot of land in this kind of category of raw land. And typically you're looking at 2 to 3 years before a building could be built and occupied, and the upfront development cost by the owner is very minimal, of course, because basically the only thing in place is the zoning. Moving up the readiness scale, the next would be shovel ready. This is one of those definitions you can ask 20 people and get 10 different ones. So, but from what we've discovered is at this level, the basic studies have been completed. Environmental permitting is complete, which is generally the lengthiest process. Initial site plan review approved. The utilities and the roads have been identified and the timing estimated to have them in place. Basically, everything's done on paper. Permits are secured, plans are ready to go. They're on a shelf, shovel ready to go the next day if a project's there. Time until occupancy can be about a year. You may have to modify some permits or do some things. And you're moving up the scale of the amount of money you're having to put out to make a site shovel ready. The next is pad ready. Basically, all the horizontal infrastructure is in place, the roads, the site's graded, the trees are cleared, utilities are stubbed out the site, not down the road. Typically, depending on the type of construction, 6 to 9 months, you can be ready to be occupied in the building. And of course, now we're talking not only cost of getting all the permits and all the plans in place, but now we're actually talking about hard cost of running utilities and constructing roads. So the costs get higher. And then finally, you can call it a spec building or available space. It's the highest level of readiness. Typically a minor build out of the inside, a couple months, and you're, as a prospect, as a business, you're occupying that space. I have to say the last sizable building kind of built in this community was our former City Hall, and that was quite a long time ago. There's very little space available greater than 20,000 square feet in the city of Palm Coast or in Flagler County. So we're faced with this issue once again. We do feel there's a lack of shovel-ready sites, pad-ready, existing space. And it's mostly raw land or somewhere in between. Some of the sites have their environmental permitting done, but no utilities available to them, no real plans to have utilities. We do have some pad-ready sites. Town Center is a pad-ready site. Airport Commerce is not. Most people think it is. It's close. It's pretty close to being pad-ready, but it's just a little bit away. So most of the sites are somewhere between. In order for the private sector, the developers, the property owners, to make that investment in developing a business park, to get it to be pad ready, or to actually build a spec building, they need a tenant in order to do that. You can't go to a bank and ask for money to construct something like that without having a revenue stream at the end. That's a tenant. That's a tenant with good credit as well. And the other side, prospects want either an existing building or a new building, and they want it to occupy in a year. This is what we hear every time a prospect comes into town. So it's really a case of, chicken or the egg. The private sector can't put out that amount of investment without having a tenant. The tenant doesn't want to be there because it's going to take too long for them to get up and running. So that's the issue we face, and we've kind of asked the question, how do we possibly bridge that gap? One idea out there always is city-owned industrial park with spec buildings or pad-ready sites. We know that's a significant investment and a risk. And so we thought, what's an alternative to that? And that's where we kind of started developing the concept and discussions with private property owners of the Business Park Partnership Program. And it tries to answer the question, how do we incentivize the private sector? So in general, the concept would be, of course, a partnership with private landowners with the goal of having multiple shovel-ready and or pad-ready sites available, with the state and regional permitting in place that can take a year or more, site plan approval for a concept building, and of course marketing materials once we have prospects here to show these sites too. Possible city investment would be permitting assistance. We have an environmental planner that can help out with some of that permitting, possibly sharing in infrastructure improvement costs. Contracting with local professionals. Engineers currently are looking for work and may be able to forego fees until a prospect's landed. Of course, our site plan and our permitting fees waived, and help with marketing materials. And what we ask from the property owners, of course, sharing in that permitting costs, paying for some of the infrastructure improvements, marketing materials, and of course, agreeing to a land price, because one of the things we don't want to do through this program is improve land and then it just benefit the property owner. We want to, the whole goal of this program would be to have prospects, businesses land here and create jobs. Of course, once again, still in concept, there would have to be some sort of contractual agreement between the city and the landowner about any public investment made. And of course, that can be negotiable based upon the things we want to happen, jobs created, the amount of wages, whether they're good paying jobs, and capital investment that occurs on that piece of property. So you're probably all wondering how and how much, and that's the questions we need answers to before we bring back a formal proposal to City Council. We need to understand, are property owners even interested in partnering in this way? What's the current readiness of the property? Is their price reasonable within the market? And what terms of any sort of contractual agreement would be reasonable to property owners? So that's why we have today in front of you a request for letters of interest. We want to open it up to all property owners in Palm Coast, because while we might talk to some, there might be someone ready to try and move their piece of property, so we will make it open to all property owners. And really, we're trying to get additional information to gauge whether this program is viable. What property owners are interested, what degree of ownership do they have in the property, the suitability of their property for development, what permit approvals do they already have or do they need, what could be the timing, the investment necessary to make their sites either shovel ready or pad ready, and then of course price of land is always an important factor for our prospects. So next steps, of course, we have the request for letters of interest in your agenda packet this evening, which talks a little more specific about what I've covered this evening. If that is approved this evening, we'll release that, gather the information from the property owners. Then we also at the same time assess professional consultants' interest, those engineers, would they be willing to forego payment up front until a prospect's landed? And of course, once again, we're not at low-hanging fruit anymore. We're starting to move up the tree. You have your annual budget process coming up, and then once we gather information, we'd be back for a formal proposal for City Council consideration. This evening, really the program, we wanted to talk to you this evening before we release anything to property owners and answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Council questions. Mr. Meeker.
Bo, I keep hearing on the outside that private property owners that have industrial park lands, their cost per square foot for the property is way out of whack with the real world, or if they have open available space in a building that's well above the average that anybody can get in Jacksonville or Orlando. Do you have any comments on that? Is that your understanding of what we're dealing with around here right now?
The market is so depressed in Jacksonville especially. It's almost impossible to build anything new anywhere to compete with those prices of $2 or $3 a square feet. What we've tried to do, and some of our proposals back with developers and property owners, we thought our price was competitive per square foot. While it's not the low of Jacksonville, the rock bottom prices, it was a reasonable price for what you get here in terms of quality of life and community. The prices aren't out of this world. It's just the other markets are so depressed right now that it is very hard to compete. And so the prospects that we would like to land are the ones that want to, it's not just rock bottom prices that they're looking for. They're looking for a quality community with a reasonable price, of course. And to compete with $3 a square foot, no one in Florida can do it. It's just impossible.
Well, of course, if we're going to invest the citizens' money on this, it's key that after the work has been completed, that the citizens get their money back. And I'm looking here at this section under where it talks about the request for letters of interest in the second paragraph, where we say, and I really hate doing this on a PDF because I can't expand it to read it even with my reading glasses, but in exchange, the city anticipates that private property owners will share in the cost of the investment, cooperation in the marketing of the property to major employers, agree to a reasonable resale price, and repay portions of the city's investment at a later date. The city's investment will need to be secured through an acceptable instrument, such as a mortgage or lien on real property. The amount of repayment and timing of the repayment will depend on a variety of factors: the number and the type of jobs created, the amount of capital investment, type of wages, and this is going to be determined during the negotiations with selected responses. I'm trying to get a warm and fuzzy feeling on how all of that is going to come together at the same time to make sure that the property owner has negotiated with us on a reasonable cost per square foot that's going to allow us to compete with those other towns that we were just talking about, and that once a successful project comes in, that money finds its way back to the citizens' coffers here at the City Council. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we're talking in concept here. Of course, it has the other side discussion with the property owner, but general thoughts on that discussion is, of course, we want some security for any public investment in a piece of property. And the terms of that security, it had to be secured by property, hopefully, through a mortgage would be the ultimate goal. So if he doesn't deliver, we have some collateral. The concept is, if we can agree to a lower price and the jobs are created that we typically would give through an incentive program with a business, basically it turns into an incentive to attract jobs, which is fine. That would be great. I mean, everyone wants jobs and great paying jobs. If for some reason, say the property owner goes, you know what, I can do industrial or commercial, I have a big box coming in, I can't meet the terms of your mortgage, then pay it back in full and we'll go on our merry way. So that's the concept in my mind, but of course, there's a whole lot of work to be done with property owners and developing that, and of course with our legal staff of how you would secure that investment.
Yeah, because if this works, if you set up a kitty up front, we ought to be able to recycle the funds through that kitty numerous times. Mm-hmm. Now, I did want to ask you about one other thing. It's in the section called Evaluation of Responses. And it talks about permit approvals are secured and permit approvals needed, you know, when we're looking at the different properties. And I suggested you add something else to that. If they have a permit, oftentimes there's a requirement that a conservation easement might be filed, or that mitigation, that they were supposed to go out and buy so many credits up front from a mitigation bank or something like that. I think that should be part of your due diligence on this, to make sure they are in full compliance with whatever permit's been issued before we stick our nose into dealing with these guys. Okay, that's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Other council questions? Mr. Lewis.
Bo, the second bullet assess the professional consultant's interest. I would imagine when you talk to these consultants, they're going to be somewhat reluctant. So are we considering or looking forward at the fact that there may be a bidding war or something like that going on eventually, if this is successful? Are we giving these pre-bidding consultants any advantage or any incentive?
Well, we're right now at this stage are really just trying to understand, because we've talked to every time an engineer comes visit Mr. Lane or talks to me, because times are rough and they're looking for work, we always point this out as, hey, I got an idea. Would you like to do some work for free and get paid later? So right now, we just kind of want to dive down to if that's a reality. I think that would be an open process. If the city were, of course, contracting with it, we'd be asking for proposals. If it were part of the property owner's deal, sometimes they have relationships that they can leverage, with their in-house, if they have an in-house engineer or someone that they'd be willing to bring to the table. So I think for sure, if the city were to contract with someone, we'd go out for proposals, so there wouldn't be any. I mean, we're looking for the least amount of money up front until we land that business. And I think so is the property owner, actually.
Mrs. DeStefano.
I recognize that we really need jobs in this town. And I think the concept is a good concept, but I have a real concern about financial support from the city. As you well know, last budget year, this current budget year, we tried not to raise the taxes, and we also did not put any money into capital improvements. And we are tight. We also know that from the tax office or from Jay Gardner that, again, we're going to get hit very low. I don't know where we would get any money to do this, and that's my concern. I think anybody that owns property, I think it's up to them to develop it. And that's where I'm coming from. Financially, we just don't have money. And I think we have to recognize you're going to do a lot of work at getting the letters out and evaluating everything, and then you come back to council. But council, we went through the budget last year and we cut and cut and cut. And I'm afraid that we're going to get through the same issue again this year. So I just caution everybody as we move forward.
Thank you. Other council questions? Seeing none, let's open the meeting from the public. Anything from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 8?
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. I just have one question. What would the initial cost to the city be in setting up this whole operation?
We have no idea.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, the initial step is sending out letters of interest. What's postage now? 43 cents a letter times. Bo, do you have any answer? I mean, it would seem to me the initial cost would be minimal.
The cost is, I'm a salaried employee, so part of the normal cost, I mean, this will go out on the internet, actually won't be mailed, so it's minimal cost because we knew it'd be unfair to come to city council tonight with not enough information, and so we really just kind of wanted to roll out the concept, get your feelings. I definitely can understand the concerns due to the budget process, and that's why we want to get better information for you before we even consider coming back with a proposal for any dollars.
Mayor, if I could add to that, we hear all the time, well, what's the city doing to create jobs? And it sometimes costs money to make things happen. This right now is not intended to spend any money. This is right now is to go out and do some exploring instead of sitting on our hands, actually seeing if there's some opportunities. And then coming back and talking about what the costs associated with those opportunities are. And obviously have, as Mr. Meeker said, how do we then get paid back any of that cost? So the goal here is to go out and explore and spend very little money. But on the other hand, and I think at the workshop, the mayor said this very well, if you, as a council, do not like this concept and will not support it when it comes back no matter what, we're wasting our time when there's no reason to waste the city's staff time or the private sector's time. So that's really what tonight is if we come back with something that makes some business sense, financial sense, and you like it, we can move forward. If you don't like it, we don't. But if you totally dislike the concept, then we just need to stop now and not go forward.
Other council comments?
Just to follow up on that comment, I like the concept, and I think I need more information to see if it's going to work or not. It might be that after you do your due diligence, there's only going to be maybe 1 or 2 property owners out there that are even interested in dealing with us and have the financial capabilities to meet their requirements of it. And if that's the case, it might be that each individual property requires, an agreement for $50,000 to get this thing moving to the point where it's pad ready, and then our expense is $100,000 for 2 projects that gets recycled over and over. Could be that there's a whole bunch of people out there, and we may need to see if we can find a way to squeeze, $500,000. We don't know that number right now. We don't know how much interest is there. But I do agree with Jim. We can't sit on our thumbs forever around here and talk about we need more jobs and we have high unemployment. There's certain things that we can do that has minimal risk, but does cost a little bit of money. And I'm not a big one for taking risk with the taxpayers' dollars, but if I've got a rock-solid agreement on payback on this kind of a deal, where I either going to take the property, lien the property, or something, and I certainly believe that if anybody can write a rock-solid agreement, Mr. Reichman and Jim can probably do it, then I think I've got less risk involved and a whole lot to gain.
I'll just add my 2 cents worth. I'm still a big advocate of low-hanging fruit, and I'm not convinced that we have totally plucked all the low-hanging fruit from this particular tree. We may find, if we get responses from the private property owners, that it may not take money. It may simply take staff time or involvement or conceptual approval, marketing, so on and so forth. We won't know that until we get the response. And I agree with Mary, if at budget time we simply say there is $0 available for anything, well, then we've not misled anybody. It's part of the budget process. And I agree with Frank. We were very interested several months ago in trying to acquire Project Koala. And we had $2 million of incentives that were not money up front, but they were money that was predicated on performance. You do certain things, and then we will provide these incentives. This is perhaps the next step up in potential risk. We may front some money, but that money is going to be secured by a mortgage. So if you're not willing to put your property at risk, then don't look to borrow our money. The worst case scenario is the city becomes the proud owner of an industrial park.
There you are.
And
we get our industrial park one way or the other, don't we?
But the important thing is, first and foremost, see if there's any interest. If there's no interest, the whole discussion is moot. If there is interest, then we can see what kind of costs are involved, and this will come back to council. So if there are no other council questions or comments, is there a motion?
I motion to approve exploring this issue.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the consent agenda, items 9 through 13. Would anybody like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda?
Surprisingly, no.
Then and therefore, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 9 through 13?
So moved.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. This brings us to the public portion of the meeting. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on any item not on today's agenda, please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Come on up to the podium.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Joseph Calderi. I've been a resident of Palm Coast for 18 years, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the bocce players. I know you probably seen me here before, and what we want to do is we really are pleading, there's a few of us here today, that you reconsider our request to put a canopy over the court. I know that it's tight. I've been hearing the fiscal problems over and over again. I read the papers, I'm on the internet, I know it's all over. But I think it can be done in a way that we can just reduce the cost. We don't have to make a Taj Mahal out of this place. We can put up these steel stanchions that support the canopy, which will override the two courts, and leave everything else the way it is. And when and if the time comes that we get a few dollars, then we can change the railroad ties that are there, the soil that's there that we throw the bocce balls on. And I don't think it's going to be that much of a cost factor, really. I mean, it's tough out there in the sun. We have a lot of players here now that can't come each day. We play Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The ladies play Monday and Tuesdays. And I tell you, they just can't withstand that sun out there for 3 to 4 hours. And the canopy would really do a good job. It would also make us play in the rain when it rains. I don't think it's that much of a cost. You know, we have a lot of people on our group that are former construction employees and even owners, and we got a pretty good idea that it's not that expensive. True, on your original plans, where you know, there would have been more detailed work done. But basically, it wouldn't take much other than a steel stanchions put up, you know, and you have an engineering group here. You can probably do everything in-house, architecture and whatsoever, just like the canopy that covers the existing picnic area. And when I say we're pleading, I speak for even the people that couldn't come today. So I would really like the council and the mayor to really give us another shot at that. I know that some of my fellow bocce players might bring up some other areas that have gotten their attention. I don't want to drag anybody that's got something down. I like to come up to where they are at. I just like you to give us serious consideration of erecting this canopy over the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Joe Canane, Cypress Knoll, Palm Coast. I already lent my support to the bocce players, sent a letter to the editor, which was published in the local papers. So I'll move on to something else. I have 3 questions that were prompted by the website identifying that there will be a bus trip to the Hard Rock Casino in Tampa coming up. My questions are such. 1, where will the revenue generated by this trip go and be used for? Number 2, will other trips be scheduled in the future, such as a trip to Biloxi? And number 3, what are the private sector local travel agents' comment on this type of activity that I do not believe belongs with the local city government? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get an answer to your question. Questions. Next speaker.
Every church runs these trips. Every church runs.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. This is about the, I don't know what you would call it, the walkway on Belterre near Buddy Taylor School. It's constantly being closed for repairs. Now, they keep it open for 2 months and close it down, seem like for 2 weeks to a month. And I seldom see no more than 1 or 2 people out there working. I don't have the faintest idea what they're doing, but I do know one thing. I see kids jumping over the board and crossing over there, and if there is something dangerous, somebody's better do something, because somebody's going to get hurt. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Marion Petruzzi, Neighborhood Watch Group Leader of the R Section in Palm Coast. I'm here on behalf of our group, and I also have some members with me here this evening. Correct us if we are wrong. It is our group's understanding a 6-foot, 9-gauge fence with 2-inch openings was bid on yesterday. Our group has been at previous council meetings where you all discussed a chain link fence along the park would not be successful in stopping trespassers, as it is both cuttable and climbable. Our question is, then why is the city wasting money on a fence that you all said would not work when there are other options for fencing out there? If you insist on a chain link fence, there are chain link fences available with 1-inch openings and stronger material, which could be more difficult to cut or climb. However, a steel barred fence would be an ideal solution. Also, whichever fence is erected, it needs to replace the 4-foot fence protecting the St. John's restricted area in the back of the park, as there are already paths back there where people are coming in from that entrance. We want this to go on record. We are very thankful for a fence. However, if the fence which is proposed to be erected does not stop trespassers from exiting and entering Ralph Carter Park by way of Richardson Drive, it is not that a fence did not work. It is that the incorrect fence did not work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, Lois DaCosta, Palm Coast. I have an item here, if somebody could put it up, and hopefully it will show up on the screen. Thank you. I'm hoping it'll show up. I'm not quite sure. Oh, great. Okay. I'd like to thank the city manager, mayor, and council members for their generous donations to the George Washington Carver Community Center Notables Auction. For anyone who doesn't know about the auction, I will just take a few moments of your time to explain. Most people in the county know the center as the Carver Gym. In recent years, the building has been aging and run down. It is the goal of our foundation to renovate and return the facility to its former status as a center of activity in its community. To accomplish this goal, many government and community leaders have donated their time and goods to raise funds for the gym. Anyone interested in bidding can access the auction site via the internet by keying in Flagler County /Carver. Then select Flagler County, Florida, George Washington Carver Foundation. A complete list of the 46 available items will then be shown, along with amounts of the latest bids. I printed this out at 3 p.m. this afternoon, and I'm sure it will end up with Virginia, but you can share this and take a look at the action that's already coming up. You may also use carver@flaglercounty.org to email your bid. Finally, you may call 313-4040 to make an offer. In each case, you must use an item number and description of the item. Again, I want to thank everyone who has donated, as well as all of the Flagler County citizens who will be bidding on these exceptional items. And there's one other positive note I'd like to talk to you about. Yesterday, I was lucky to be at the chamber and have a recognition for Jane Culpepper. I think most of you know her, most if not all of you. And they gave her a lovely award yesterday and have designated May 11th, 2011 as Jane Culpepper Day in Flagler County. And if you're available, there will be something for her at the public library. Friends of the Library are having something. I just wanted you to all know about it. And she's an exceptional lady, and I hope some of you may be able to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Hello again, Lynn Weaver, address invalid. See, that's why I'm here today. I spoke to you 5 months ago about the Citizens Issue Tracking System, and you all said that you'd look into it. Well, I'd appreciate it if somebody do something more than look into it. I cannot follow issues. I can't log a problem. Myself and many other people that don't live in the old city limits find ourselves unable to access your system. The way the system is set up, and I have a printout of what happens, if you do not have an address the system recognizes, you cannot file anything, which brings me to my reason for trying to file something. I know that you've made arrangements for those of us who've paid stormwater fees and haven't been served by the stormwater system, and my question is, how are we supposed to go about trying to get those rebates? I can't find an answer online. I have another problem I'd like to bring up with you. I spoke about the barbed wire and the cattle back in December. Well, the barbed wire is still there. Absolute violation of your code. Now, I understand there's a DR on that commercial property that allows agricultural use, but agricultural use is not agricultural district. You cannot have barbed wire unless you're an agricultural district. And even if it was an agricultural district, you could only have 3 strands, not 5 strands. Seems like a minor issue, except that the city of Palm Coast fined me $1,500 for my improper fence, gave me 30 days to get it down. And when you all were discussing it, they said, and it's in the transcript, let's make an example out of her so other people don't do it. I'd appreciate it if other people didn't do it, since I had to pay. And I think that they should pay. I paid $10 a foot. They have tens of thousands of dollars of fence. That would pay for your bocce cover, that would pay for your fence, pay for lots of things. I also have a problem with the cattle. According to your code 3.0106, animal feedlots and livestock operations are not allowed. That's what y'all told me. Except if there's a supermajority and the PLD Regulation Board approves it. I have been filing Freedom of Information requests to get that information, but no one seems to know anything about it. You know what, guys? You paid Sonic a lot of money to not build in this town. If you didn't want a farm in this town, then you should have bought me out. I have had nothing but problems because I am an agricultural concern. This is my 3rd time in front of the board, basically because of the same things. I filed Freedom of Information Acts and get no responses. I meet with your officials and they tell me to ignore the code, we want to work with you. Well, that's great till Ms. Grossman shows up and starts finding me for having cattle. You guys rezone me. I'm not even allowed to have my horse trailers, let alone store my material. Can't do anything you're supposed to do on an agricultural property because you zone me a state. So I'm supposed to sit quietly and wait for you all to come after me? Guys, this is my living. I really do farm. A lot of you know me. I have a check from the city of Palm Coast for $5,000 when I ran your camps, little kids out there. I'm not a fly-by-night. This has been a farm. It was a farm before the city came. It's a farm now, and I intend to keep it as a farm.
15 seconds, please.
But I would appreciate it if you'd quit taking away my rights and allowing everybody else to do whatever they want. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. And let's see, Mr. Landon. Bocce courts, I know we've had discussions in the past.
Yes.
I guess what we need to do is take a look at other lower cost options.
Let me give you an update. And first of all, the bocce ball court cover is actually part of the design of the renovations to the park. A cover, a roof like that, no matter what the design is, does have to be design engineered because of our winds in this area to make sure that it sustains the winds. The idea behind the improvements to Holland Park now, what City Council instructed staff to do is, instead of going out for one bid for all the improvements, to actually separate it out into separate little projects. And projects that we could do in-house and do it ourselves for very little cost, such as improvements to the dog park, to move forward with some of those when we had those very specific issues. In the dog park, for example, we didn't meet ADA requirements, and there were people who had accessibility issues that we couldn't accommodate, so we had an obligation to do that. The bocce ball court cover is another item that I've been told by my construction staff that could be done separate and not have to be part of the overall project. So the idea behind this is when we get the design completed for the park is to take those projects that we can do individually that are low cost. Some of these are high dollar items, you know, the improvements to the drainage, the street improvements, et cetera, we can't do ourselves, and they're going to be high dollar. But the bocce ball court might be one of those we can do at a lower cost. So after the design for the whole park is complete, the idea is to come back and separate those out. What I'd ask is either Nestor or Luann get a contact, because I don't know who who we can contact, but if we can get a contact name to keep the bocce ball players updated, and so that we can work with them.
Mr. Caldari, give us your contact information after the meeting.
And then we can kind of let them know where we are with the design and some of the options. The other thing that's going to happen, and you've all mentioned it, is that then this gets plugged into the budget process. It is, I mean, you're going to get tired of hearing this, but after 4 years of cuts, going on year number 5, and the news we got from the appraiser's office, another $1.5 million in cuts unless you raise the rate, that, as we talked about last time, to make those kind of cuts, you're going to have to lay people off. So you're going to have those decisions as improvements, capital improvements, taking people off the streets, because that's where we're headed. So I just got to point out to people that right now, in order to start doing our capital improvements again, because as was pointed out, we put a hold on all capital improvements, that there are consequences, and those are a overall big picture. Some of these are going to be low-ticket items, I understand that, but there's still going to be those decisions and those discussions coming your way as part of the budget.
Mr. Meeker?
Mr. Mayor, Jim, the roofing structure that has been being discussed for this, is it a structure like the pavilion with cross members and roofing and shingles and all that, or is it something as simple, or can it be something as simple as galvanized metal pipe in a rectangular shape with, similar to it's not exactly a bimini, I guess you almost look at it as a bimini top on a boat with a looped tarp over it. It can be that temporary until the final design is done. I mean, a tarp loop stitched around galvanized metal pipe and a frame around the top of it can't be more than $2,000.
Probably would not meet the wind load requirements.
Right. But you're going to have code issues with something temporary like that. But I didn't come with details. I don't know what the design is, but
I just think a horizontal structure is probably not going to gather a lot of wind, but okay.
And it's still going to have to meet code. The key to it is we anticipated this coming when we did the dog park. We knew that was coming. We're fences around parks. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. As you do the little ones, there's going to be more that are coming, and it's going to be choices that we have to make. But this should be a relatively low-cost item. It's just a matter
of... If you take 100 low-cost items and plug them into a budget, you've got one huge pile of money. So
you got it.
I do think we're going to have to look at this at budget time.
But
Mrs. DeStefano.
yes, sir. I have to concur with the bocce ball group. I think that if there is a will, there is a way that we can do something. Mr. Landon, you say when the design is complete. I've been sitting here, and I don't know how long we've been talking about a design. To me, there ought to be, with in-house staff and Public Works, why we can't do something to give them a canopy. Because if you're going to wait for a design complete, you're talking they're going to get through this summer again, because I don't believe it's more than 40 or 50% complete. And I think we should be able to find a way to do it. And I would, my personal opinion as a council member, I'd like you to look at that and see why we can't do it with in-house staff.
I want to just add to that, Mr. Mayor. I've sat here for a year hearing the bunch of people talk about what they need, and I just can't believe that they've been at this even before we had our budget hearing last year, and we're still kicking them down the road.
Yeah, that's right.
We've put out money for many things. Some things I didn't even agree that we should do. But I think when you're out in that hot sun and you're trying to do what they're doing, it is unbearable, you know. And if we can find money to do some of the other things that we do, which may or may not be for that will meet the needs of these people, I think we should make an effort to do it. I know I agree with you that we have to stay within code, but they're asking right now for a simple, temporary shelter from the sun until we get around to either putting up a structure or not putting up a structure. But right now, I think we should give them some sort of temporary relief.
Mr. Mormon, do you want to weigh in? Okay. Let's bring that on the workshop. Bus trip. Where does the revenue for the bus trip go? Luann?
Luann, I'm going to come on up.
Let me just preface this. This is an interesting coincidence because there is an individual Palm Coast resident who for years has been organizing bus trips on her own using a private tour company, but taking no profit, making no money, just doing it as a service to our community. She's now talking about looking at the options of maybe joining with adult education, the city of Palm Coast, to see if there's some more organized structure. So we have three questions. Where does the revenue for the bus trip to wherever it is, the casino, go? Are there other trips planned? And are there any comments from the private sector?
To answer the first question, we make very little revenue on the trips that we do. We do it more as a service to those in our community. The trip actually costs us $25, and we charge the participant $30. The extra, if there is extra, we are obligated to pay for $45. If we have 37, we cover the cost of the trip with that extra $5 that we've collected. We've also placed ads in the Observer that were about $250, so that extra will cover those costs as well. So if there's an extra, it does cover those additional
I
fees.
suspect the real revenue goes to the casino.
Yeah. Now, as a participant, you pay your $30, you get a $25 credit voucher to play at the casino, and you get a $5 lunch voucher. So in essence, it costs you nothing to go. So,
Are there other trips planned?
we do have other trips planned. We're looking at a time frame of September through May of every year as our trip season. Nothing overnight at this time. Potentially one for Savannah for a 2-day night, but we don't have details of any of that yet. So, yes.
And the third question, are there any comments from the private sector? I'm assuming you're not using a city-owned bus for this tour. You're probably contracting with the private sector.
And we do contract with the private sector as needed, whether it's a bus or, in this case, with the Hard Rock, they actually schedule the bus and everything. We just tell them how many people we have going, so they manage the trip for us and play host. So, but we do use the private sector. We haven't had any comments from those in the community or the private sector other than giving us a price for the costs.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could add to this, that when Luann came here a few months, actually it's been over a year now, one of the things that council members had asked is that instead of just looking at youth programs, we actually try to develop programs that really catered more to the desires desires of the particularly the seniors. And that's exactly what these trips are geared towards, or the retirees. Yeah.
Where's Ray?
And so there's been a variety of them. Some of them are, I know it was a dinner theater, those type of things that aren't geared towards the youth. So that's really...
Just one other comment. We did have an activity today. It was a AARP speaker came in to talk about the new health care. We had about 39 senior adults in attendance. We did hand out a survey and ask them what else they would like us to do for them. A overwhelming response with day trips and activities of that nature. So we're kind of in line with what we are being asked to do of those in our community.
Then I'm going to again ask that we get together with this individual who's been doing this on her own, and I'm sure she's run probably hundreds of trips in the last 11 years. Pick her brains, see what kind of trips have been most successful.
Yep.
Are these the kind of events that we would be, that we could be focusing if we had a dedicated senior center?
Not necessarily, because as long as you have a parking area, because you're taking them somewhere else. So here it works for those individuals because they park here in our lot. The bus comes here, and they go and they come back to this location. My previous experience has been the biggest concern of those who are participating is that their vehicle is going to be safe wherever it is. So at this building, somewhere. I know a couple of them use the Staples parking lot for their trips. So the parking is the issue, not necessarily the building.
Thank you. The walkway by the schools on Belterre, Mr. Landon.
This is a classical one. You've actually had contractors get up and talk about how they know how to design walkways better than the engineers. Well, this contractor decided he knew how to design it better than engineers. The problem is the certified engineer said, no, this doesn't work. The history of it is that when the inspections were done, it did not pass. So then we blocked it off temporarily to find out if it was structurally safe to have people walk on it. The engineer determined that it was structurally safe, and we opened it back up. Now under construction, it's not that because it's actually the construction is the footings under it. It's not the safety of construction as much as they don't want people walking on it because the concrete has to settle, and as people walk on it, it creates vibration, and then it doesn't set correctly, and so you don't have a good job. So the blocking off at this point is not a safety factor, but it is trying to make sure the final product is up to the standards. So yeah, it's frustrating to open it and have it closed, but ultimately we will have a structure that should last longer and meet the design of the engineer.
See, that's the joys of design build. You all know the story of the three little pigs. And if you do a design build, you're going to get a house made out of straw most of the time.
Yes.
So. Okay. The chain link fence, Ralph Carter Park, has it been bid? And what gauge fence was bid upon? And it makes sense to me that if there's a tighter mesh, that's probably what we ought to be using.
Well, the fact of it is that, yes, we do have a standard design, standard specs that we do for all our chain link fence, and that is exactly the chain link fence we went out to bid on. It's not actually bid, but it is quotes. Because of the urgency that the neighborhood talked about, we should have that contract signed this week. And
well, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt. It would seem to me that we could ask in our request, or in our quotes, for an alternate on this other gauge fencing.
You want us to start over? We can do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak for council. I can tell you that I think we need to do that as an alternate.
Definitely. There's no sense in putting up a fence if they're going to be able to cut through it.
Well,
We had that over in Seminole Wood Park.
Whatever fence you put up, they're going to be able to
But
cut
if you have a
through it.
1-inch opening and it's stronger, as opposed to the 2-inch opening,
It will not matter. I can tell you it won't matter from experience. We can spend the extra money, but if they're going to cut through it, they're going to jump it, they're going to be able, this is where design by committee is always interesting concept, but I can tell you that they're still going to be able to climb it, they're still going to be able to cut it. What I'm think is important, and what we talked to the neighborhood about, was it's not just about the fence, it's about more activities, structured activities, taking back the park, having both recreation and the sheriff's department more involved in the park, and then the sheriff's department more involved in the neighborhood, so that it's not just a fence. The fence is a deterrent, but you also have to get control of the behavior of the people there that are terrorizing some of these neighbors. We can go out for alternate, but if a different chain link is not going to change the results based on our experience.
I would agree that the fence is not the end of the process, it's the beginning of the process, and I agree completely that structured activities, more presence in the park, so on and so forth, is part of the long-term solution. A fence is a deterrent. It's not a solution, it's a deterrent. And yeah, you can probably climb a 1-inch mesh if you try hard enough, but I can tell you from experience as a child, it's a lot easier to climb a 2-inch mesh. You may not deter everyone, but the less agile will probably have more difficulty. So anyway, I would very much like to suggest that we look at that other chain option.
yes, yes.
That's just me. That's just me. During council comments, ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to chime in. Ms. DaCosta, thank you very much for your efforts on behalf of the Carver Center. Anybody want to do a commercial for what they've put up for bid? Anyway, go online. There's some interesting stuff. Okay, last we have Ms. Weaver, Citizens Issue Tracking System. Are there problems with it? Can't we get IT to fix it? It would seem to me there has to be some mechanism.
I do not know, Mayor.
I'm not 100% clear on what the issue is. Is Ms. Weaver still here?
I don't think you can register online for the tracking system without a valid address, I believe is what she said.
Well, I don't have a discussion now, but if you could see me afterwards.
But it's that little form where you just fill it in, and one of the things it says is service address. And when you go to key an address that's not part of the database, it won't accept it.
Okay.
And then you can't submit it without an address.
Do me a favor, chat with me after the meeting. I'm sure there's a way IT can solve that one. Her second issue, because she can't get on the citizen issue tracking system, how does she get notification about rebates on stormwater?
Mr. Moden is in the audience and can let her know tonight exactly how that process works.
Okay. And the issues, the aggregative issues, cattle feedlots, barbed wire, so on and so forth. We have a code, we don't have a code. What permits the conditions to exist in violation of our code? How does that work?
Well, this is what we call a development of regional impact, a DRI, and in that there's a contractual agreement as to what's allowed and what's not as the land use. And in this case, as a temporary measure before development occurs, that land use agreement indicates they can have agricultural uses, including the cattle and the fence that you're seeing out there.
3-strand barbed wire, 5-strand barbed wire? I mean,
I don't. Is that Nestor? Do you know if that's actually part of that agreement, or is that just?
Yeah, it's in our code. It's in our land development code. That's one of those things that come to you from time to time as a glitch, because we're trying to regulate agricultural through our land development code. That needs to come out. there's standards for cattle, whatever the number of strands is, there's a state standards for that, and we just need to take that language out of
Well, then
our
let's-
land development.
Can we do that?
It's in the works. It's in part of our glitch,
Okay.
the next glitch
Oh.
that you'll see.
Okay. I think did I miss anything? I think I've got them all. Discussion by city council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. Mormon, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'd just like to ask Mr. Landon, have we heard anything from Walmart recently?
I have not.
So, where are we?
To not have an update, I could try to find out, but every time I've talked to them in the past, they always say, well, not now. And so
When does their permit expire?
Ray, can you help me out, please?
Yeah, I think they have, they did the Senate Bill 360, so I believe they have 2 more years left, maybe a little bit less. But they just recently extended their site plan application.
The Senate bill that Ray's referring to is that the state says that we have to approve an extension for 2 years.
This is
That's it. Mr. Lewis?
Nothing.
Nothing. Mrs. DeStefano?
Yes, when I mentioned the Bocce Ball court cover, you mentioned that bring it up to the workshop. What I'd like to have at the workshop is some kind of a cost estimate, that it can be done in-house, whatever way possible. And the second comment is I would like to support the mayor and the fence, the 1-inch opening. I know the fence is not going to be the end-all and the be-all, so be prepared. But at least we're trying to comply and trying to get some sense of some normal activity down there. Put a fence up with barbed wire on the top, maybe, but they'll still cut.
But only 3 strands, not 5.
They're still they're gonna cut through. We went through that down on Sesame on Seminole Woods a couple years ago, where they put a chain around the water fountain and took the water fountain out of the concrete. So we hear you. It's just that we're trying to get you an answer. And I don't have an answer, but I will support the fence, and I will support the strongest fence that we can possibly do.
Mr. Meeker?
Well, might as well chime in on the bocce ball issue as well. I think there are alternatives. I don't think we have to design something very elaborate. If our land development code doesn't allow a simple solution to the problem, then maybe it's time to revisit the land development code on certain things, or possibly have somebody apply for a variance to allow a simple solution until we're ready to put up a permanent solution. As for the fence for the over in the R section, I can support 1 inch or 2 inch. I mean, 1 inch would be fine, but is it going to stop a dedicated kid with a set of bolt cutters? Nah, not at all. And I've looked at some of the designs. I haven't seen all of them. I suppose there are some of those metal panels with the spikes on top that we saw at the workshop or at the public hearing. I've seen 2 different designs. One are screwed together, another is bolted together. I suppose there's some out there that are welded together. As you go up in from screws to bolts to welds, cost goes up considerably. I'm not here to produce something for aesthetics. I can get over one of those fences too. I think the chain link is going to be the way to go, and I can support the 1 inch. But it wouldn't have made any sense at all to me to put one of the spiked panel things up if I could unbolt it or unscrew it with an electric screwdriver, drop the whole panel, and then go walk into the park. So that's just my thoughts on that. The only other comment that I have is I wanted to bring up just a quick note about an idea on water supply. I know that Jim and the staff have had some interesting meetings this week. They're working very hard on the modification with the Water Management District on the consumptive use permit, and I know they've made some progress. But in thinking about where we're at now and where that allocation is going to take us and how long that allocation is going to last, once that permit is issued, we still need to start looking towards the future. And Jim, I was hoping that you would then take some time to sit with the staff, and I think in this case probably the stormwater staff as well as the utility staff. And I would like them to look at, we have a model that's ongoing right now. It's been a very long-term model because of the costs associated with it, looking at the stormwater management system and its impacts on drainage within Palm Coast. I'd like to take a look at increasing the height of the weirs to hold back more water and recharge more water without causing flooding on existing properties. If we were able to hold back more water or well, just hold back more water, period, we could then apply to modify the existing permit and allow us to withdraw the amount of water that we're recharging into the system. It's kind of a give and take. If we can demonstrate that we're recharging the system with X amount of water, I believe that we could modify the permit in the future to remove X amount of water at the same time. We could also look at back pumping water up the hill with the same goal.
The repumping, that was brought up.
Yep. Well, I brought that subject up a long time ago, and that's because when you during the summer where you see the canals in some of the higher sections of the city going dry, but we're still discharging water out the tide, it doesn't make a lot of sense. If we could start moving that water around, take the water out of the intercoastal and ultimately move it up to up the hill, that could get us some additional water.
It's a little salty, I'm afraid.
No. I'm not saying take it out of the intercoastal. We are discharging fresh water to tide, ultimately through Graham Swamp into Ditch 10. I'd like to reduce some of that water and keep that fresh water and move that back up the hill, not salt water. We could also, as part of this recharge idea, we could include areas that are outside of the canals, such as golf courses, because they're supplying recharge every time they irrigate the golf courses, which is water that's coming out of the stormwater management system. That's recharge going in there as well, and we ought to be able to get credit for that. In talking with Mr. Bowden real quick about this, he had a great idea too, that we could consider widening some of the secondary and tertiary canals, getting some additional storage in there, causing more water to go in. And just to give you an idea, now, I mean, this is just a rough non-engineering calculation, but conservatively, if we were able to gain an additional foot of storage within the stormwater canal system, and I'm not convinced we can actually get a foot, but that was just an easy calculation for me. And if I assume I got about 60 miles of freshwater canals and an average width of 50 feet, that's about 363 acre-feet of additional water per day. That works out to 118,284,068 gallons of water a day that we might be able to get credit for in a request to modify our consumptive use permit.
I like your idea, except that I don't think if you raise the weir, you're not going to get a per-day savings.
No, that's just the total volume of water that we would gain by an increase of 1 foot. And if that water is going into the aquifer, then I ought to be able to take it back out, because the current permit assumes that the weir is right where it is. If I've increased it by a foot, that's an acre-foot calculation. That's just additional water. I might be able to pull it. Now, all right, I might have to take evapotranspiration loss. This was just a quick, iPhone calculation kind of a deal. I'm just saying,
Looking at alternatives.
Trying to look at alternatives, look at ideas that we can consider. I think that we would have the support of the executive office for doing so. Get our permit now, get going, and then start looking at these alterations or options at a later date. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing tonight.
Therefore, Mr. Meeker?
Let's adjourn the meeting.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you for your participation.